this room this morning, I suffered from stage fright because I said, oh my God, so many rail experts. But then I settled down and I said to myself, this is a good training ground for my father of this bride speech, which I will have to give in July. But obviously, I'm hoping that there'll be no questions and answers after that. So just to start off with, I think that if this meeting had taken place 5 years or so ago, there wouldn't have been a mention of the S word. So sustainability has really taken off, and particularly in recent years. And literally every paper and every presentation here today touched on it to some extent or other. Whether it was the graduate program and the apprenticeship program, that is the social and economic side of it. The rail milling, just to mention one, is definitely reduce, reuse, recycle. That's the environmental side of it. And then, of course, the rail development plans that we heard about here today, they are all the economic side of it, including the big developments in Cork and in Belfast. So, I hope now I can get this moving rightly. So, basically, I'm just going to introduce you to sustainability today in Irish Rail. It's such a big area that I could spend hours talking about, so I'm going to confine myself largely to the environmental side of it because social and economic deserves a kind of session in their own right. When we wrote our first sustainability policy about 2 years or so ago, we were very sort of naive in what we were putting down there, and we have since updated it, and now it's called Sustainability in Motion 2024 to 2030, and I've given the web link there for anyone who's interested in seeing it. Essentially, what we're doing in this is we are linking ourselves back to the United Nations SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals, across the 3 pillars of the environment, the social and economic. And as I said, I'm going to concentrate on the environment here today. We have a wide-ranging reach, and so with that comes wide-ranging exposure to sustainability issues. We provide intercity, regional, commuter and DARTS services, 144 stations, 2,400 kilometres of operational track and all, and everything that goes with that, whether it is fencing, drainage, signals, buildings along the way, etc., etc. This year, we hope to hit about 51 million passengers and 80 million by 2030. That will bring us back to about the 2019, where we were at pre-COVID. Rosslare Europort is also in there as well, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's not a railway. And we have a limited rail freight traffic, but that's expected to grow quite a bit as the rail strategy 2040 is implemented. And then, of course, we have a workforce of 4,600 people. Now, there's a whole load of building blocks to the development of that particular sustainability strategy. But I've highlighted in red here 3 key strategies which I'm going to focus on today. The first one is our climate action plan. That's how we reduce our carbon. The second one is the climate adaptation strategy. That's how do we react to increasing adverse weather conditions. And then the third one is the Scope 3 carbon reduction strategies. I've just documented a few more there, but the one right down at the bottom, that's going forward, to drive everything we do. That's the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review. We had a presentation on that earlier on today. So that basically dictates that the fact that the number of assets we have is going to grow over time, and so therefore our exposure to climate issues will as well. Supporting those strategies is a wide range of key policies, and they cover the environment, the waste, energy, health and safety, equality, procurement, etc., etc. And indeed, there's a whole host of other policies which I could have included there as well, but I didn't want to be crowding up the page too much. There's also key guidelines. We have issued our own biodiversity guidelines, and we also have our own stakeholder engagement guidelines, because it's very, very important that we communicate with the stakeholders and let them know what it is that we are actually doing. Underpinning that as well, there's a number of national guidelines. For example, there's the recently published fourth draft of the National Biodiversity, and then there's also project appraisal guidelines as well, which our colleagues in capital investment have to pay particular attention to. So the three documents that I referred to in red previously, we have our climate action plan completed, and that's up on the website. I've given the link there as well for those who are interested in it. That was launched last October by the Minister. Our climate adaptation strategy 2024, we have that finished, but we are waiting for a date in the Minister's diary to get to launch that, and then that will be also up on our website. Our Scope 3 emission reduction strategy to deliver net zero by 2050, that's basically completed at this stage. Our corporate communications people are hammering it into a sort of a user-friendly shape, and hopefully within a couple of weeks, months, that will also be launched formally by the Minister. In which case there will also be access to it through our website. Now, this is a very crowded slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just wanted to show you here that we are endeavouring, insofar as we can, to link back to the 17 SDGs, the 17 UN SDGs. We have a wide range of rail improvement programs, and we have set out goals opposite each of them. These programs cover the customer, they cover the staff, they cover water and waste, they cover carbon, they cover biodiversity, and they cover EU reporting requirements, etc., etc. So there's quite a bit in there, but this is only just a sort of a snapshot, just to show that we're linking in with the SDGs, we are developing programs, and we're setting targets, and that's what we're trying to achieve. Getting on to the climate action plan, the planet, you could say, is on fire. And for the last 11 months, month after month, new records have been set. June 2023 was the warmest June on record. July 2023 was the warmest July on record. August, September, October, all the way up to April of this year. We're now in May, and probably when they come to reporting on May, we'll have 12 solid months, one after the other, where heat records have been broken. I'm not going to spend too much time in this because I get the impression that we're infrastructure rather than fleet, but it's important to realise that the fleet is the real culprit when it comes to the generation of Scope 1 and 2 CO2. Scope 1 is basically what we use in our engines. It's diesel. Scope 2 and 3 is what we buy in by way of electricity and gas. Diesel accounts for 85% of our total energy use, of our total traction. The other 15% is electric and gas. We have a target set for us that we are to reduce our Scope 1 and 2 by 51% up to 2030. So that essentially is going from 144,000 tonnes in the base year of 2018 to about 71,000 tonnes in 2030. The pie chart on the right-hand side there shows the challenge. The grey, that's our newest fleet. It's the intercity railcar fleet, and it accounts for 53% of the total carbon. So we clearly can't just take that out and replace it, because that's not how the railway works. You can't afford to do that. And then there's a whole plethora of other engine types. There's so many issues involved in replacing those. That has to be done in a coordinated fashion and according to funding and age profiles, etc., etc. And our 2050 target is for net zero across all three scopes, including 1, 2, and 3. Now, I come to Scope 3 further on. So in terms of our climate action plan, which we launched last October, we have 4 areas where we are targeting to reduce the CO2 emissions. One is to reduce reliance on diesel, and that's look at biofuels, HVOs, and green hydrogen. We have focused a lot in our plan on the HVO. We had a number of concerns about that, which seem to be less of importance now than what they were when we started thinking about it, relating to a premium price, relating to whether it was ethically sourced or not, and also relating to what impact it would have on the engines. The second is a shift to electric operations, and we heard earlier on today about the electrification either in the Dublin area or in the Cork area, and the retirement of old DMUs and road fleet. It takes a while to roll that out, and it has to be done depending on funding. The third area is the green energy generation. We have been looking at a corporate power purchasing arrangement, but it's not clear what sort of accounting arrangement will be done for that, whether or not we can take credit for it. And then finally is the reduced energy consumption, and there's a number of trials that have taken place on our 2 biggest fleets, the ICR fleet and the 29,000 fleet. There's 234 cars in the ICR and 216 in the 29,000 fleet. And that would be through engine upgrades and transmission upgrades and hybrid battery operations. And that could reduce our fuel consumption by, they estimate, between 20 and 30%. As regards 2050, that's a long way off, but hopefully at that stage we would have the full DAT and the Cork area rolled out. And as Andrew pointed out earlier today, that the strategic rail review foresees electrification of the main intercity routes between Dublin, Belfast and the 4 provincial cities. And then who's to say what sort of technology will be there in 2050? Hopefully by 2050 the other routes can be operated by batteries, which may be better than what they are today, or the likes of hydrogen or HVO or whatever. But the target is 2050 net zero across all 3 scopes. Now, this is what our glide path looks like to go from 2018, 144,000 tonnes down to about 71,000 tonnes by 2030. What's above the line in white is what our profile would be if all we did was replace some of our older DMUs with new battery electric cars. So clearly, on the basis of those white charts there, we would not achieve the 144. So what we have, the 70,000. So what we have shown below the line is the areas that we are looking at to generate that red line going through that shows us gliding all the way down to 70,000. So the 4 areas really are addressing the engines, sort of replacing the engines with new hybrid engines and transmissions. The green is the biofuel. We assumed about a blend rate of about 35%. Then the blue then is the corporate power purchasing arrangement, and then the orange is relatively small. That's what the IM can contribute by way of the yellow plant and other operations. So then, moving on to our climate adaptation strategy, I just wanted to put up here to illustrate to you that Irish Rail have got a very large and varied asset base that can be impacted on somehow or other by the weather. So there's 2,400 kilometres of track. There's thousands of cuttings and embankments, bridges and culverts. There's hundreds of level crossings, and there's 144 stations. Then there's a number of other civil engineering assets as well, by way of pines, buffers, etc. In terms of the buildings, a lot of them are heritage, and they also include modern sort of facilities that can be impacted by weather, lifts and escalators and car parks, etc. In terms of the SET, there is a mixture of electrical and mechanically controlled signals. There's cause and ATP, there's overhead lines, and there's substations, and then there is 2,300 signals. The chief mechanical engineer has a large volume of fixed assets as well by way of workshops and depots, and also has got quite a variety of fleet types. And then I've included Rosslare Europort just so that we don't forget it, but I'm not going to talk about it because we are railway people. So here, I could have chosen any one of 100 pictures that clearly illustrates what the impact of climate change is in terms of temperature, in terms of flooding, in terms of drought and scouring, etc., etc. As I said, I could have put up there 100 pictures that shows what it is. So essentially, we have set out in our strategy, which is yet to be approved or launched. We have 4 areas that one is the improved operation resilience, whereas there's a code of practices by the RU in terms of how they operate during the different weather conditions. There's the improved asset resilience, which I'll come to. I won't say too much about it just yet because I'm coming to that. And then there's the enhanced service levels, which is how do we recover after an incident. And then in the 4th box, that really is our climate action plan by way of reduction of carbon. So it's all about analysing, adapting and building. And with that in mind, there's the 6-stage process in the transport climate change, and we are working our way through that. But one key element of that, which is ongoing at the moment, is the development of our infrastructure manager multi-annual contract. This would be our 3rd contract to cover the period 2025 to 2029. Basically, we are in negotiations with the department at the moment for, in 2023, prices about 440 million per annum. That's absolutely critical in terms of addressing issues regarding climate adaptation. That's the main source of funding for it. And I'm glad that both Eamon and Cathal are here present so that if there's any sticky questions on that, they can field them. Right. As regards the Scope 3, the Scope 3, those are the emissions that are basically outside of our control because they're upstream and downstream. But Scope 1 and 2, which, as I said, covers the diesel and the electric and gas that we consume, that's literally the tip of the iceberg. The main part of it is it could be between 70 and 90%, depending on which railway company you talk to, of their emissions, maybe of the Scope 3. The Scope 3 is literally upstream and downstream. It is the various stakeholders that we have. And what the challenge for us is to identify them and quantify them and work with them to reduce their carbon input, which then basically becomes part of our carbon chain as well. Now, with that in mind, we have become a founder member of the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and we will be working and encouraging, we'll be working with and encouraging our stakeholders to basically participate in this. It'll have benefits not just in carbon, but also in the wider social and economic as well. Now, in the development of our strategy, this will evolve. There was no target set for 2030, but there is a target set for 2050. 2050 is net zero. So what we have done is we have taken a shot at providing targets for 25, 30 and 40. It's obvious that we're going to have to visit them and revisit them and revisit them as things go by. But we have time, but time catches up in you pretty quickly, so you can't afford to sit on your laurels too much on that one. Now, apart from climate change, mitigation and adaptation, there's also a whole host of other environmental type issues that we have to be very mindful of. There is a biodiversity emergence, and I think that we can see that and hear about it anytime you listen to various programs these days. Critically important for us are vegetation management and the management of invasive species. Water. we have to protect the quality of the water that we may be interacting with, but we also have to manage flooding and line-side drainage, and there's a number of examples of that. I mean, there's Ballyclare in East Clare that gets flooded from time to time, and then there is what happened in Middleton in recent times, and then water, of course, is the seas and the impacts the coastal erosion has, so we are concerned about water. Chemicals and pesticides, that's an important issue and a growing issue in terms of the plants and the species and so on and so forth. Circularity and waste management, this is about reducing resources and material consumption, and in fact the last presentation that we did here in terms of rail milling, that is a very, very good example as to what we are involved with there, along with ballast cleaning, etc., etc., etc. And then there's the compliance with regulations, technical standards, legislation, monitoring and reporting. Now, reporting, I think, is the bane of my life at the moment. And unfortunately, I would have to say that for the next year, I'm going to spend more time concerned about reporting than concerned about implementing. And there's something a little bit wrong there. But in terms of reporting, we are collaborating with CIE and the two bus companies, the Bus Éireann and Dublin Bus. But we are determined that we will be developing and implementing our own strategy, and that we will be reporting on that, but we will be reporting on it in such a way that there can be a bigger picture taken of the CIE group, including the railway and the two bus companies. The two key areas with deadlines are the EU taxonomy, which has all got to do with identifying greenwashing, and then there's the CSRD, which comes into law later on this year, and we'll have to report on that in 2026 for 2025. So the ongoing work at the moment is we are working on the materiality assessments in terms of both impacts and financial. This is something completely new to us. We are getting external help with that because we need it. And then there's the CSRD gap analysis. Again, some preliminary work has been done on that, but those two areas will keep me very busy, I think, for the next year. And in terms of governance, in terms of the environmental side of it, we've set up an environmental sustainability committee. I chair that, and then every quarter is chaired by a member of the Irish Rail Board, who reports on then onto the board. And then to cover the economic and the social sustainability, we have set up a committee on that, and I chair that as well, and that covers the broader issues that we have spoken on here today. And then, in terms of the corporate sustainability reporting directive, that's the CSRD, which I previously referred to, there is 12 areas. Each of them is a bit of a minefield, and really the only one that I've really focused on here today is the one under environment dealing with climate change. So there is going to be a whole host of reporting there. My colleague who just spoke about the graduate programme, that falls in under social, under the own workforce. And so this is going to be the big area, but as I say, I think it would be a pity if the emphasis is on reporting rather than implementing. Let's implement and then report. And finally, I just want to say that climate change is not a future problem. It is now an everyday problem. And that's what's driving our sustainability strategy, because we recognize that we have a role to play. In the overall scale of things, railway generates less than 1% of all of the CO2, but at the same time, we can't say we're only a small player, we have to do something. But it's not just Scope 1 and Scope 2, it's Scope 3, which is the big issue, and then there's the wider issues as well, the wider non-carbon issues, whether it is biodiversity or whatever it is, value for money. But climate change is not a future problem, it is now an everyday problem. Shin Chen.